By virtue of the powers vested in me as Vice-Chancellor, I hereby constitute this congregation of the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, for the conferment of degrees and granting of diplomas and certificates. It's my pleasure to address you today. Ideally, we should have had this in person, but given the current circumstances we find ourselves with, I'll address you virtually today. This is a very august occasion of conferring on you your qualification in one of the top 1% of universities in the world, and definitely a premier university on the African continent. Your commitment and persistence indeed paid off. You are now part of a group of illustrious Wits equipped with a world-class education that will undoubtedly open many doors for you. You've had an extraordinary head start. You stand on the shoulders of many great leaders who have walked through these walls, inspired change, and left their mark on society. They are people with a passion for excellence, defenders of the truth and justice, and activists who change the world for good. You walk in the footsteps of 4 Nobel Prize winners: Nelson Mandela for peace, Sidney Brenner for medicine, Nadine Gordimer for literature, and Aaron Klug for chemistry. For almost 100 years, Wits has nurtured intellectuals and innovators, scientists and researchers, discoverers and originators, problem posers and problem solvers, critical and thought leaders. These are individuals who have gone on to punch above the weight in their world of work. Today, you have become a member of this prestigious group. You will now have to build your own legacy as the future leaders in society. You have the Wits edge. You have been equipped with the necessary academic, research, and professional education to reshape the future of our country, our continent, and the world. The networks you have developed, your curiosity, your desire to change the world for the better will make you a good leader and a real Wits. You are our future leaders. You represent hope for us all. Wits do make a disproportionate impact on our world. I urge you to hold dear the values of this great university as you journey through life. Remain curious and advance beyond your comfort zones. Ask questions about everything to everyone. Hold those in power to account. Speak truth to power. Think critically and independently. Value intellectual excellence. Serve through your social active citizenship as a catalyst for change. Be resilient and adaptable. Appreciate collaboration and collegiality. Foster democracy and cherish humanity. We live in an historic moment characterized by uncertainty and change. You are graduating in the middle of a global pandemic unseen in 100 years. Our young democracy and other democracies abroad are buffeted by challenges and civil challenges and civil unrest. Our society is plagued by inequality. Our economy is not performing as it ought to, with unemployment rising. Yet I remain hopeful because of you, because I know that great societies, both here and abroad, can flourish in times of flux and rapid changes. We are rapidly adapting to change in our personal, professional, and social spheres. This moment provides us with a moment to pause and reflect on our political, healthcare, and socio-economic challenges that plague this world. We need to reset the baton as we reimagine our common futures. You will play a pivotal role in this process. It will be by no means an easy feat, but you must master your collective courage and strength to seek hope in despair and seek knowledge in failure, build innovation in disorder, and thereby advance our common humanity for good. This ceremony presents a fortuitous moment of hope and inspiration, an opportunity to chart a new course that can propel us into a new beneficial world order that will serve the public for good, for the good of all people, for the good of our future generations, for the good of our country and the world, for the future of our economy, for the good of an inclusive community, for the advancement of our societies, and for the good of the environment and the climate. We'll do this for yesterday and today and for tomorrow, for all our collective futures, for good. But we'll only succeed if we are guided by our conscience, our ability to discern right from wrong, our morals, our ethics, and how we uphold the principles of good governance and leadership in all aspects of our lives. When developing new vaccines, let's put people before profit. When you hold public office, let's serve with honor and diligence. When we live in a democracy, let's respect the law, the courts, and public order. When we treat patients, let's provide them with the best care available. When we build bridges, let's do so to the best of our abilities. We look forward to walking the next leg of our journey as we approach our centenary in 2022. We'll continue to harness our intellectual resources for good. We'll continue to develop excellent graduates who advance society, conduct world-class research, and foster innovation, and use our location in Africa to lead from the global south. Finally, please allow me once again to congratulate you, your family, your loved ones, on your moment of this great achievement. This day is yours and represents a culmination of many years of hard work and dedication. Remember this moment. Savor it. Your graduation is an important milestone, which certainly will change your life forever. Today, candidates will be presented for degrees in the 5 faculties: the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management, the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment, the Faculty of Humanities, the Faculty of Health Sciences, and the Faculty of Science. I award and confer degrees and granting of diplomas and certificates on the persons whose names appear in the graduation program. I call upon the Deputy Vice-Chancellor to introduce the deans.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor, for that introduction, and welcome to all the graduates and their families to this virtual graduation ceremony. It's a great pleasure to say a few words of congratulations on this major achievement. Of course, you should all be able to hug your family and friends and throw your caps in the air, but sadly, that is not to be. But I do hope that you are able to celebrate in your own way, because this is a major achievement. You've managed to obtain your degrees despite all the odds, and I'm sure it's been a difficult time for many of you. So once again, congratulations on this achievement. We have 6,712 students graduating in this cluster, of which 169 are PhDs and 876 are master's graduates. You've all now joined the ranks of being a graduate of Wits, which is an international leading research-intensive university. This degree gives you a passport to go out into the world and to make it a better place. Wits prides itself in its diverse student population. that is broadly representative of our country's demographic. This gives your graduation additional significance as well as additional responsibilities. So once again, congratulations on this major achievement. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I now have the honour to call upon the deans of each faculty to present candidates for degrees, diplomas and certificates.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, as Acting Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management, I have the honour to present candidates for degrees and diplomas. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honour to present candidates for degrees and diplomas. Doctor of Philosophy, Bachelor of Commerce, Bachelor of Economic Science, Bachelor of Accounting Science, Postgraduate Diploma in Accountancy, Postgraduate Diploma in Law, Postgraduate Diploma in Specialized Accountancy, Postgraduate Diploma in Taxation, Master of Commerce, Master of Economic Science, Master of Laws, Bachelor of Accounting Science Honours, Bachelor of Commerce with Honours, Bachelor of Economic Science with Honours, Bachelor of Laws, Master of Business Administration, Master of Management, Postgraduate Diploma in Business Administration, Master of Management in Entrepreneurship and New Venture Creation, Master of Management in Finance and Investment, Postgraduate Diploma in Management. On behalf of the Dean and academic staff of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management, let me take a minute to applaud each and every one of our graduates. Last year was something none of us expected to ever experience in our lifetime. In the shortest of time, our staff and students had to lock down and find ways to carry on teaching, learning, and managing the university without physically being on campus. And you were the class that made that adjustment. Your transition to emergency remote learning and your desire to complete your qualifications and pursue your education in a time characterized by worry and uncertainty showed your leadership to so many in the student body and inspired your professors. While staff across the university rapidly pivoted to move all our teaching online, we could only do so much. At the end of the day, it was you, the individual students, those of you graduating today, who made that transition a success. You are graduating because you took responsibility for your performance and practiced the diligence and focus needed to complete your courses. The occasion is all the more momentous when you consider that this faculty is presenting over 2,100 graduates in this cluster. Our bachelor's graduates in Commerce, Economic Science and Accounting number over 800, and over 300 students completed their Bachelor of Law. Our postgraduate honours, postgraduate diploma, and master's degree candidates have specialized in fields of economics and finance, business sciences, accountancy, law, management and business administration, and governance, among other fields from across our faculty's 6 schools. Your achievements at Wits give you the power to make your mark in business and industry and transform our society. It is especially worth recognizing our 30 PhD graduates, each of them having produced work recognized as making an innovative and original contribution to their field. These scholars have confronted stubborn problems in areas of human rights, governance, economic growth, financial inclusion, and sustainable development, or have tackled new, emerging questions in cybersecurity, cryptocurrencies, digital markets, and information technologies. Our PhDs have addressed challenges in state-owned enterprises and municipal service delivery, and have guided policy direction on trade and national development, job creation, access to education, and access to aid. Our PhDs are informing how we understand competition between firms, how to strengthen marketing and management, and develop our SMME sector. The empirical contexts of their PhD work reflect Wits' position as a leading institution in South Africa and on the African continent, as their work extended beyond the borders of South Africa into empirical settings such as Lesotho, Zimbabwe, and Ghana, among others. I encourage our undergraduates to read the citations to our PhDs in the graduation booklet and to be inspired. We hope to see many of you continuing with your studies. But let us also take a moment to remember those students who could not complete their studies in the time they would have liked. Those students who were overwhelmed, who had to take care of families who lost loved ones, or who had to deal with increased unemployment in their immediate circles. Your success today says a lot about you, but equally it says something about the resources you had to get where you are. So if you are one of those students who were lucky enough to have stability that included regular meals, a supportive family, Wi-Fi, and emotional support last year, I encourage you to recognize this privilege, to share your gratitude with your loved ones, and to share your achievements with those who supported you. COVID has indeed changed the way we see the world and the way we think about our place in it. Out of this dreadful pandemic, we have achieved a greater awareness for the struggles of small businesses and our people who rely on each day's work to make it through. We appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit that saw people step into the gaps that were created for society's needs. And we saw the spirit of Ubuntu that encouraged all of us to check on not just our loved ones, but our neighbors and fellow students and colleagues, and find ways to support where we could. Graduates, I hope you harness that goodness and use the excellence that is a Wits degree to go out and build a better world. While many people continue to be surrounded by sadness and deprivation and hopelessness, at the same time, we must see that we have a unique opportunity to reset. We are encouraged by your bright minds, your ability to work hard and overcome obstacles. You show us what perseverance can look like, and I have no doubt you will set us all on a better path. This is a time to build better, more caring communities, to strengthen businesses to survive in times of unforeseen crisis, to protect our natural resources and the inhabitants of the earth, and to build economies that are more equal and inclusive. You have already overcome one of the hardest challenges you are ever likely to experience. I expect your future will be so much easier to manage. Take everything you have learned over the past few years, and particularly your experience over the past 18 months, and go and build a better future for us all. Congratulations.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the pleasure of presenting the students from the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Frank Adu, with the thesis entitled Studies on Domestic Resource Mobilization in Ghana, supervised by Professor P. Alagidede. Michael Asamoah, with the thesis Essays on Private Capital Flows and Real Sector Growth in Africa, supervised by Professor P. Alagidede. George Aisi Boateng, with the thesis Political Regimes and Economic Development in Ghana's Fourth Republic, supervised by Professor P. Alagidede. Bradley Borders, with the thesis Shaping Monetary Policy and Development in South Africa, the Role of Jack Holloway and Andres Brewer from 1914 to 1950, supervised by Professor M. Padayachi. Bonaventure Buyaruhanga, with the thesis Examining the Role of Corporate Governance in Microfinance Institution Operations in Uganda, a Case of Bushenyi District, supervised by Professor T. Mukhale. Eugene Chen, with the thesis Uncovering Selected Antecedents of Collective Intelligence of Strategic Project Teams, supervised by Professor B. Urban. Balesa Chuene, with the thesis An Integrated Model for Information Technology Servitization Adoption in South African State-Owned Enterprises, supervised by Professor M. Kwekwaletse. Pholile Dladla with the thesis Sources of Risk in Insurance Markets, supervised by Professor L. Mncube. Tsepo Fila with the thesis Determinants of Successful Competition Between SMEs in the SADC Countries, Implications for Strategy and Firm Performance, supervised by Dr. Tim Tanti and Professor K. Oja. Rose Gwawaya with the thesis Access to Aid, Case Studies of Women's Organizations in South Africa and Uganda, supervised by Dr. D. Miller. Sizwe Gwala with the thesis A Secure Cyberspace as a Strategic Focus Point in Governing the Internet Ecosystem, the Case of South African Public Sector, supervised by Dr. A. van Niekerk. Divaris Jaravaza with the thesis Culture, Contraceptive Attitudes and Advertising Perceptions, the Case of Rural Zimbabwe, supervised by Dr. F. Sarochera and Professor S. Burgess. Yang Kim with the thesis At Crossroads of International Development Law, International Human Rights Law, and International Investment Law, Reflection on the Right to Development in the Exercise of Expropriation, supervised by Professor M. Peterse. Seyaram Kumar with the thesis Cryptocurrencies and African Financial Markets, Integration, Risk Analysis, and Diversification, supervised by Dr. J. Mensah. Anthony Mavikaraye with the thesis Bus Service Quality and its Relationship with Cross-Border Passenger Satisfaction and Referral Intention in Zimbabwe, supervised by Professor R. Chinomona and Dr. N. Kliya. Melody Mandefie with the thesis An Analysis of the Effectiveness of Corporate Social Responsibility in the Mining Sector, a Comparative Study of South Africa and Zimbabwe Mining Companies, supervised by Dr. R. Horn. Mpikeleli Mnguni with the thesis Government Strategic Interventions to Optimize the Performance of Creative and Cultural Industries, a Case Study of SMMEs in Mpumalanga Province, supervised by Professor P. Pillay and Dr. M. Muller. Lumkile Mondi with the thesis A Long Walk to a Just Energy Transition, the Political Economy of the Restructuring of ESCOM, 1985 and Beyond, supervised by Professor M. Padayachi. Matuku Mphahlele with the thesis Capacity Development of Service Delivery Structures and Programs in Bujanala Platinum District Municipality, supervised by Dr. E. McCandles. Dennis Murekachiro with the thesis Stock Price Prediction in Sub-Saharan Africa, supervised by Professor T. Mukwaleli Mokoteli. Tabiso Musendame with the thesis Management Effects on Company Performance, a Mixed Method Study of the South African Rubber Industry, supervised by Professor D. Caldwell. Nzeni Nechitomboni with the thesis The Industrial Development Cooperation Under Apartheid, Financing Industrialization in South Africa, 1940 to 1990, supervised by Professor W. Frond and Dr. N. Pons-Vignon. Oluwole Olaleye with the thesis The Nexus Between Performance Information Use and Service Delivery in South African Local Municipalities, supervised by Professor P. Pillay and Dr. M. Muller. Morris Omane Ajepong with the thesis Essays on Cryptocurrencies and Traditional Assets in Emerging Market Economies, Dynamic Modeling, Connectedness, and Spillovers, supervised by Professor P. Alagidede. Riaz Patel with the thesis Developing and Testing a Framework for Digital Channel Adoption in Emerging Markets, supervised by Professor C. Callaghan. Buitumelo Sibupa with the thesis Building Brand Commitment from the Internal Brand Management and Employee-Based Brand Equity Factors, supervised by Professor H. Du. Thabo Sepuru with the thesis Access to Pro-Poor Education Benefits for Urban Parents in Democratic South Africa, supervised by Dr. A. McLennan and Professor P. Pillay. Amar Siddiqui with the thesis Impact of Firm-Level Characteristics and International Marketing Strategies on Export Performance of SMEs in South Africa, supervised by Professor R. Chinomona and Dr. N. Chilia. Clive Vinti with the thesis Hydrocolonization in Lesotho Highlands Water Treaty, Legitimate Treaty or Murky Waters, supervised by Professor T. Murombo. Mel Webeloff with the thesis The Role of Statistical Numeracy in Computational Models of Risky Choice, supervised by Dr. M. Muller and Professor P. Pillay.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, as Dean of the Faculty of Engineering in the Built Environment, I have the honour to present candidates for degrees, diplomas and certificates. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honour to present candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honour to present candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Aeronautical Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Civil Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Electrical Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Electrical Engineering, Information Engineering option. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in Industrial Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Mechanical Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering, Mining Engineering. Master of Engineering. Master of Engineering, Professional. Master of Science in Engineering. Master of Science in Engineering Management. Master of Science in Industrial Engineering. Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Chemical Engineering. Bachelor of Science in Engineering in the branch of Metallurgy and Materials Engineering. Bachelor of Engineering Science in Biomedical Engineering. Bachelor of Engineering Science in Digital Arts. First of all, congratulations to you all. Many of you are graduating with your professional undergrad or honours degree, and others of you are being awarded postgraduate qualifications. You have no idea how badly this world, this continent, and this country needs you and your skills. We live in the most remarkably difficult times, so well done to all of you. But I do want to emphasize two simple points for you to ponder. The first point is that the world is in trouble, and it needs you. And the second point is an obvious one, really, and that is I want to tell you that if you stop learning, you stop living. I feel no fear of contradiction when I say that this university produces and develops the very special kind of person. A person who is critical yet faithful, able to identify openly failings, yet nevertheless remains loyal. People who can argue without losing respect for each other. I would suggest that this is a university that produces the brave, people with courage, people who are able to make a difference, even when that action itself seems frightening. This is not a university that has always endeared itself to authority, neither past nor present, because this is a university that's role in society is to challenge, to look for a better way, by having the courage to suggest that by thinking, by debating, by arguing, by challenging, by interacting together, and with many folk from all over the world, we will indeed find a better way. You have all been part of this here, either on this campus or, most recently, virtually. So firstly, we are living in a time when the world is in trouble. This is a world in need of leadership. Do not misunderstand me. I'm not implying the kind of leadership that governments alone can offer, nor not. as the case may be. I'm thinking of real, lasting, dependable leadership, the kind of leadership that people like you can offer, the kind of leadership that says, I really care and I will make a difference. I will criticize, but only because I do care and I can help. Our world has deep, wicked challenges. Admittedly, there has been poor planning and execution of some of the most critical elements of many of the fundamental building blocks to success. There is no doubt that the path to achieving our vision must be paved with an excellent education system, absolute accountability, and a policy environment that will ensure success. But it also needs people willing and able to make a difference. You are our future leaders. The world needs your skills and your leadership now more than ever before. The world needs the competence that you have developed over the past few years. Never forget that you have all been fortunate enough to get a world-class education. Not everybody gets that opportunity. You are all highly qualified and competent. And when I say competent, I mean something quite specific. Competence is achieved by three things: knowledge, skills, and your attitude. Leave this university and deploy those skills and those competencies. The world, the continent, and the nation is looking to you to do just that. Also, as far as possible, remind young people that engineering and the built environment careers must not remain a mystery. They are the very basis of our future success. Finally, you must never stop learning. Some of you are graduating with postgrad degrees and even PhDs. That's fantastic. But please make it one of your life's objectives to look for more knowledge. Knowledge, as they say, really is power. Our heartiest congratulations to you. You have made it through some of the most difficult times that this planet has ever experienced. And also, as you celebrate, remember all those who helped you to get to where you are now. And when you get the chance, lead, put back, and support the next generation. Thank you.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present to you the students from the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Ryan Bradley, with the thesis, Earth Brick Shell Housing in South Africa, a Structural and Performance Considerations, supervised by Professor M. Gornet. Craig Carlson, with the thesis, The Sound of Ink, supervised by Professor M. Postima. Ellen de Mello Koch, with the thesis, A Coarse-Graining Perspective of Deep Learning, supervised by Professor L. Cheng. Uzochukwu Enwerozo, with the thesis, Algae Biomass Cultivation in Fish Farm Effluent for Biodiesel Production, supervised by Dr. K. Harding and Dr. M. Lowe. Xebiso Kamujariwa, with the thesis, Changing Procurement Culture to Enable the Successful Adoption of the Collaborative Practices in Construction, a Model for Client Change, supervised by Professor D. Root. Oliver Maponga, with the thesis, A Geometallurgical Characteristics of the Hangwe Coal Field. How does coal formation affect coal exploitation? Supervised by Dr. S. Bada, Dr. N. Wagner, and Professor R. Falcon. Furufero Mulawudzi, with the thesis, Mechanistic Study of Metal Dusting Corrosion for Austenic Alloys in the Petrochemical Industry, supervised by Professor L. Cornish. Jafet Obiko, with the thesis, Hot Forming and Welding Simulation of 9 to 12% CRP92 creep-resistant steel, supervised by Dr. D. Whitefield and Dr. L. Chown. Maxwell Ozono, with the thesis, Co-gasification of coal and solid waste to hydrogen-enriched cingers in a fixed-bed gasifier, supervised by Professor M. Daramula. Tukuluko Rampai, with the thesis, The Investigation of the Mechanical Properties of Max Phase and Cubic Boron Nitrate Ceramic Composite made by spark plasma sintering, supervised by Dr. D. Whitefield. Yelena van der Grip, with the thesis, multi-point statistical simulation in modeling a structurally complex geological environment, supervised by Dr. D. Rose and Professor R. Minute. Yu Chi Yen with the thesis Demand Modeling of Horizontal Electric Water Heaters, supervised by Professor W. Grenier and Professor K. Nixon.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, as Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, I have the honor to present candidates for degrees, diplomas, and certificates. Doctor of Philosophy, Master of Dentistry, Master of Medicine, Master of Medicine in Anesthesia, Master of Medicine in Anatomical Pathology, Master of Medicine in Community Health, Master of Medicine in Dermatology, Master of Medicine in Diagnostics Radiology, Master of Medicine in Emergency Medicine, Master of Medicine in Internal Medicine, Master of Medicine in Microbiology and Pathology, Master of Medicine in Obstetrics and Gynecology, Master of Medicine in Orthopedic Surgery, Master of Medicine in Otolaryngology, Master of Medicine in Pediatrics, Master of Medicine in Plastics and Reconstructive Surgery, Master of Medicine in Psychiatry, Master of Medicine in Surgery, Master of Medicine in Urology, Master of Science in Dentistry, Master of Science in Medicine, Bachelor of Clinical Medicine, Practice with Honors, Bachelor of Dental Science, Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, Bachelor of Clinical Medicine Bachelor of Clinical Medical Practice, Bachelor of Oral Health Sciences in Oral Hygiene, Postgraduate Diploma in Health Sciences Education, Postgraduate Diploma in Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, Diploma in Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, Master of Pharmacy, Master of Public Health, Master of Science in Epidemiology, Master of Science in Nursing, Master of Science in Occupational Therapy, Master of Science in Physiotherapy, Bachelor of Health Sciences Honors, Bachelor of Nursing, Bachelor of Pharmacy, Bachelor of Science in Occupational Health, Bachelor of Science in Occupational Therapy, Bachelor of Physiotherapy, Bachelor of Health Sciences, Diploma in Advanced Nursing. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome you today to the graduation ceremony for 2021. Today we're going to be recognizing 488 individuals that have been able to complete their studies over the course of the past 1.5 years, which has been extremely challenging at multiple levels. Included amongst the 488 graduates in the Faculty of Health Sciences are 44 that will now be conferred the degree of a PhD. To them, a special congratulations, because this accomplishment has taken place in the midst of extremely dark times across the globe, as well as in South Africa. Over the past 1.5 years, we have faced immense challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the manner in which it has disrupted our lifestyles, the manner in which it has disrupted functions at the university, both with regard to social activities as well as with regard to activities related to teaching and learning. Despite those challenges, we have you as a collective that have been able to stand up and be counted amongst those that have been successful in completing their studies. The celebration today, obviously, is one that not many of us would have envisioned would be occurring in the type of manner in which it is taking place. For many of us, graduation ceremonies are things filled with pomp and ceremony. Graduation ceremonies traditionally have been occasions when we're able to share the happiness with our families and friends. Unfortunately, for some amongst us, we've actually lost loved ones, people that we otherwise would have been sharing this happy occasion with during the course of the past 1.5 years due to the impact that COVID-19 has had on the health of our loved ones. Nevertheless, I think it's important for us to realize that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, the global scientific community has been immensely successful in ensuring that we can develop tools, and in particular vaccines, that will assist us to get beyond this particular period and to get back to a relatively normal lifestyle, hopefully within the course of the next few months. Further challenges that we currently face in South Africa speak to itself in terms of just the difficulties that we face as individuals as well as a country. The current social upheavals certainly creates a further dark cloud in the midst of all of gloom that we've experienced over the past 1.5 years. Nevertheless, it's still important to reflect on your achievements. It's important to reflect how your achievements are going to equip you, either in pursuing further studies and hopefully at the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Witwatersrand, as well as how your studies is going to equip you now to form part of society as you pursue your career, hopefully for the upliftment of all South Africans. And with those few words, I thank you for having taken the time to participate in the ceremony, and I wish you the best of luck with your future.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present you the students from the Faculty of Health Sciences for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Clement Adugyamfi with the thesis Measurement on Indenomine 2,3-dioxygenase activity, a potential biomarker for active tuberculosis disease in South Africa, supervised by Dr. J. George, Dr. M. Sochart, and Dr. D. Savulescu. Yasmin Agosti with the thesis Measuring Epidemiology and Serocorrelates of Protection Against Severe Respiratory Syncytial Virus, Associated Hospitalization in HIV-Exposed and Unexposed South African Children, supervised by Professor S. Madi, Dr. E. Simus, and Dr. B. Chai. Obosi Amin Boama with the thesis Development of a Framework for Accessing Clinical Competence of Nursing Students in Ghana, a multi-method study, supervised by Dr. C. Crismals and Dr. S. Armstrong. Oluwatosin Ayeni with the thesis Multimorbidity and Breast Cancer in Sub-Saharan Africa, Profile and Impact on Staged Diagnosis and Breast Cancer Treatment Decision, supervised by Dr. M. Joffe and Professor S. Norris. Nicholas Baki with the thesis Reliability of Forensic Facial Identification from CCTV Recordings with Implications for Admissibility to Court, supervised by Dr. N. Breyer and Professor M. Stein. Sipiwe Dlamini with the thesis Non-Communicable Disease Risk in Black South Africans, Dissecting the Role of Glucocorticoid, supervised by Dr. J. Godeke and Professor Z. Lombard. Amanda Urge with the thesis How Women Come to Commit Neonaticide, a constructivist grounded theory of criminal cases, supervised by Professor U. Subramani and Dr. D. Hoffman. Amy Geard with the thesis Gene Therapy for Visceral Gaucher Disease, supervised by Professor P. Abanoth, Professor S. Waddington, and Dr. G. Massaro. Barbara Hanrahan with the thesis an intervention program to enhance respectful maternity care in labor by midwives in the public midwives obstetric units in a district in Gauteng, supervised by Dr. S. Armstrong. Brian Hodgson, with the thesis Central Arterial Hemodynamics in the Normotensive Peripheral Blood Pressure Range, supervised by Professor A. Woody Wits and Professor G. Norton. Yasser Hussain, with the thesis Antibody Functionalized Nanoliposomes to Slow the Progression of Ovarian Cancer, supervised by Professor P. Kumar, Professor Y. Chunara, and Dr. C. Penny. Catherine Hopkins, with the thesis Curbing the Non-Communicable Disease Epidemic, an evaluation of integrating rapid test for NCD risk factors and navigated linkage to care into a standard HIV testing service platform for adults in Soweto, South Africa, supervised by Dr. D. Doherty and Professor S. Gray. Alexander Gahaka, with the thesis Policy and Practice of Abortion in Eastern Uganda, supervised by Professor L. Manderson. Blessings Kawunda, with the thesis Sexual and Reproductive Health Service Use and Resilience Among Adolescents Attending Hospital Teen Clubs in Urban Blantyre, Malawi, supervised by Professor L. Manderson. Shonisani Romani, with the thesis Using an adeno-associated viral vectors to model HBV subgenotype A1 replication in cell culture and in vivo, supervised by Dr. B. Mayeba, Professor A. Ellie, and Professor P. Arthur Bennett. Gillian Mahumane, with the thesis Nano-reinforced hydrophiled 3D scaffold for neutral tissue engineering, supervised by Professor P. Kumar and Professor Y. Chunara. Yolanda Malele Kolisa, with the thesis Oral Health, Related Quality of Life and Oral Health Needs of HIV-Infected Adolescents in Johannesburg, supervised by Professor J. Igumbo and Professor V. Yengopal. Alfred Manye, with the thesis Towards Eliminating of Lymphatic Filariasis in Ghana, Refining the Strategy Through Quality Improvement, supervised by Dr. F. Baden, Professor L. Ibisomi, and Professor T. Chirwa. Martin Mauser, with the thesis The Impact of Penetrating Abdominal Trauma of Gut-Associated Lymphoid Tissue and the Influence of HIV Infection, supervised by Adjunct Professor F. Plani, Associate Professor D. Kruger, and Dr. S. Pather. Chispus Mayora, with the thesis Retail Drug Shop Markets in Uganda, Incentives, Effect on Healthcare System and Implication Care System and Implication for Children's Health, supervised by Professor K. Nyangi Bakwin, Dr. E. Ekirapa Kiracho, and Dr. H. Wamani. Gainelwe Mopi, with the thesis Systemic Blood Flow in Hypertension in a Community of African Ancestry, supervised by Professor A. Woody Wits and Professor G. Norton. Hilary Mdlovu, with the thesis Tunable Biomimetic Hybrid Scaffold for Wound Healing and Skin Regeneration, supervised by Professor L. Dutoy, Associate Professor P. Kumar, and Professor Y. Chunara. Mpho Molete, with the thesis School-Based Oral Healthcare Problems in the Tshwane District of Gauteng, Scope, Implementation, and Outcomes, supervised by Professor A. Stewart and Associate Professor J. Igumbo. Rajan Murrah, with the thesis Clinical and Immunopathogenetic Aspects of Sarcoidosis, supervised by Professor C. Feldman. Anna Musalo with the thesis Development and Pilot Testing of a Support Intervention for Women Treated for Cervical Cancer, supervised by Professor J. Marie. Tsegofatso Modau with the thesis Arteriosclerotic cortical dysfunction in groups of African ancestry in Africa, supervised by Professor A. Woody Wits and Professor G. Norton. Asanda Mtinsilana with the thesis Delineating the Pathophysiology of Type 2 Diabetes in Middle-Aged Black South African Women, supervised by Dr. J. Kodeke and Associate Professor L. Mikkelford. Nasiru Muhammad with the thesis The Potential of Zingazone Administered Orally to Neonatal Rats as Protection Against High Fructose Diet-Induced Metabolic Derangements, supervised by Dr. B. Lembede and Professor K. Elwanga. Vaneshveri Naidu with the thesis Addressing the Blind Spot, the development of an assessment tool to evaluate the physiotherapy clinical education program, supervised by Professor A. Stewart and Professor N. Maleka. Nomagugu Ndlovu with the thesis Effects of Dietary Supplementation with Hibiscus subdarifa calycis meal in broiler and egg-laying quail, supervised by Associate Professor E. Chivandi and Professor K. Elwanga. Margaret Ndomondo Sigonda with the thesis Evaluation of Medicine's Regulatory Interventions in the East African Community Region, supervised by Dr. J. Mayot and Professor S. Naidu. Olutoini Mola Ojifinini with the thesis Preconception Care Service in Nigeria, an exploration of its knowledge, perception, experiences, need, and feasibility, supervised by Associate Professor L. Ibisomi. Machweni Pupedi with the thesis Factors Influencing the Vitamin D Status of Adolescents in Johannesburg and its effect on body composition, supervised by Emeritus Professor J. Pettiford and Professor S. Norris. Jehofajo Rampaleng with the thesis Variation of the African Face, Analysis of Face Masks using Geometric Morphometrics, supervised by Dr. N. Bryars, Dr. J. Hemingway, and Dr. T. Holton. Chanel Robinson with the thesis Adipokines as Biomarkers of Subclinical Cardiovascular Disease in Rheumatoid Arthritis, supervised by Associate Professor A. Millen and Professor M. Ma. David Sachs with the thesis Genetic Basis for the Breadth and Potency of HIV-1/V2 Specific Antibodies, supervised by Professor P. Moore and Professor L. Morris. Laske Subnel with the thesis The Development of Children Born to Mothers with Diabetes Mellitus in Pregnancy, Growth, Body Composition, and Cognitive and Motor Development, supervised by Professor S. Norris and Associate Professor K. Klipstein Grobusk. Christopher Stanley with the thesis Joint Modeling of Recurrent Clinical Malaria Episodes and Longitudinal Parasitemia Data, supervised by Professor Tabias Chirwa, Professor Lawrence Kazembe, Professor Miriam Lofa, and Professor Mavuto Mukaka. Renate Strelau with the thesis Neurodevelopmental Intervention in Early Treated HIV-Infected Children, supervised by Professor J. Potterton. Jordan Swiggers with the thesis The Distribution, Number, and Certain Neurochemical Identities of Infracortical White Matter Neurons in Primates, supervised by Dr. B. Masego and Professor P. Manger. Maxwell Tatiana with the thesis novel BOTB photosynthesizers and corresponding nanoconjugates in an in vitro antimicrobial and anti-cancer study, supervised by Professor M. Patel and Dr. S. Mweno. Vincent Shabalala, with the thesis, The Effect of the Co-Administration of Antiretroviral Drugs and/or Topiramate on the Migration of Neural Crest Cells and Neurogenesis in Avian Brains, supervised by Professor A. Ihuno and Associate Professor E. Mbachioku. Mari Uamahoro, with the thesis, Development of an Instrument to assess self-management barriers among patients diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in Rwanda, a mixed method study, supervised by Associate Professor D. Castellane and Dr. N. Kosimafuta. Rebecca van der Steen, with the thesis, Exploring the Potential Engineered Antibodies to Prevent HIV Cell-Free and Cell-Cell Transmission, supervised by Professor P. Moore, Professor L. Morris, and Professor M. Weinberg.
Hello, and a heartfelt welcome to all of you as graduates and soon-to-be graduates, friends, families, and loved ones. My name is Professor Garth Stevens, and I'm thrilled to speak to you today as the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, a faculty that you are all now graduating from. Let me begin by congratulating all of you for this outstanding achievement. You are indeed the cream of the crop, especially after having emerged from the last 18 months in which we have seen the global coronavirus pandemic ravage much of the world. Each year, we receive approximately 70,000 applications to the university, and just over 1,500 of you are accepted into the Faculty of Humanities. You are now either graduating with your first, second, third, or fourth degree, so give yourselves a round of applause. These are each remarkable achievements in and of themselves, and so I would also like to extend my hearty congratulations to all of you. Today, we will graduate more than 1,500 undergraduates and postgraduates, and more than 40 of you will be graduating with a coveted apex degree that we know as the PhD. This is a phenomenal achievement for our faculty, but most importantly, for all of you. You have had wonderful opportunities to explore the subjects that have stretched your minds, developed robust and critical thinking, and allowed you to think deeply about the future of the world. As a country, we continue to deal with the enormity of a collective loss associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I extend my best to all of you who may have experienced illness or loss, either directly or indirectly, over the last 18 months. But COVID has also revealed the ongoing challenges facing us today. Resurgent inequality, the spectre of violence, another scramble for Africa, questions of good governance and leadership, health and education as ongoing sites of development, socio-economic development, and the digital divide, to mention but a few. At the same time, we anticipate new ways of reimagining megacities, more porous borders, new possibilities for rethinking the future of work, economics, democracy, and sustainable environments and ecologies. Access to technology in the age of digital transformation and innovation will generate unprecedented forms of connectivity and social relating. And of course, Africa will continue to generate its own forms of culture and knowledge in the world. And let us not forget that while we had all hoped that 2021 would bring with it a changed set of circumstances around the COVID-19 pandemic, we will still have to contend with the behavioral dimensions of disrupting the transmission chain of the virus as we wait for the much anticipated full rollout of vaccines. These are the challenges facing graduates in the humanities today. We are all living in a challenging but exciting moment when we have the opportunities to change our futures for the betterment of all. And that is my challenge to all of you. Fulfill your potential as the best and the brightest, and engage these challenges head on so that you may lead us as the next generation. I want to end by congratulating all of you once more, to thank your families, your friends, and your loved ones on whose shoulders you have stood to get this far, to acknowledge all the staff who have had a hand in your accomplishments, and to wish you all the best for 2021 and beyond. Most importantly, I wish you and your loved ones health and safety during these times, and I hope that this will be the beginning of a fantastic new phase in your lives as you seize the opportunities before you. Celebrate your success today, be safe, and congratulations to all of you once more. Vice-Chancellor, as Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, I have the honor to present candidates for the following degrees, diplomas, and certificates. Doctor of Philosophy, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Education, Bachelor of Education Honours, Bachelor of Education, Postgraduate Certificate in Education in Senior Phase and Further Education and Training Teaching, Bachelor of Arts in Digital Arts, Bachelor of Arts in Dramatic Art, Bachelor of Arts in Film and Television, Bachelor of Arts in Fine Arts, Bachelor of Arts in Performing and Visual Arts, Bachelor of Arts in Hearing Therapy, Bachelor of Audiology, Bachelor of Music, Bachelor of Social Work, Bachelor of Arts Honours, Master of Arts, Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology, Master of Arts in Community-Based Counselling Psychology, Master of Arts in Dramatic Art, Master of Arts in Heritage, Master of Arts in Social Work, Master of Music, Bachelor of Arts with Honours, Postgraduate Diploma in Arts, and Postgraduate Diploma in Translation and Interpreting.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the pleasure to present to you the students from the Faculty of Humanities for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Bernadette Aneimani with the thesis The Role of the Teacher in Developing Learners' Mathematics Discourse and Understanding, supervised by Professor A. Essayne and Professor J. Adler. Christiana Alex Ojei with the thesis The Socio-Cultural Influences on Maternal Health Care Utilization Amongst Adolescent Mothers in Nigeria, a Pooled Data Analysis, supervised by Dr. C. Odimegu and Dr. N. Divet. Dineshri Balia with the thesis Going Online, an analysis of shift journalism practice in the Mail and Guardian's history of digitization, supervised by Associate Professor G. Daniels and Professor H. Wasserman. Amanda Kavau with the thesis African Music, Knowledge and Curriculum, Applying Bernsteinian and Legitimation Code Theory to South African Music Curricula, supervised by Dr. S. Harop Allen. Cinderella Chandambuka with the thesis Narrative of Women Residing in a Rural Area on Intimate Partner Violence, a case of Chimanimani District, Eastern Highlands, Zimbabwe, supervised by Dr. R. Warrior. Siboniso Dlamini with the thesis Exploring the Identities of Progressed Learners in 4 Township Schools, a phenomenological study, supervised by Professor N. Karim. Barend Engelbrecht with the thesis Sound Art, Space, Time, and Johannesburg, supervised by Professor G. Olivier. Claire Hart with the thesis Surfacing the Sibling in Self-Psychology, Exploring the Potential Development Functions of Siblings, supervised by Associate Professor T. Graham. Miesha Hayden with the thesis Red and Hue, Exploring the Significance of the Black-White-Red Triad in South African Sandrock Art, supervised by Dr. J. Winges. Ledinoa Hungwe with the thesis Prospects of Amalgamating Indigenous Knowledge Strategies with Biomedical Strategies in the Guidance and Counseling Curriculum for Secondary Schools in Zimbabwe, a focus on HIV/AIDS, supervised by Dr. E. Mushayikwa and Dr. M. Ndebele. Kenneth Kaplan with the thesis Fractures, an inquiry into the figure of the medical doctor in films set in African conflict zones, supervised by Professor G. Olivier. Renee Koch with the thesis, Learning Through Art, Decision-Making in a Complex Domain, supervised by Associate Professor D. Andrew. Dale Langsford with the thesis, Those Who Can Think, Teach, the Pedagogical Reasoning of Pre-Service Teachers from Different Initial Teacher Education Pathways, supervised by Professor L. Rosniak. Rafilwe Lepere with the thesis, Performing Invisible Labor, supervised by Associate Professor S. Ali. Nobunye Levin with the thesis, Spillover, Feminist Love Praxis, supervised by Professor J. Mistry. Yanga Lusanda Majola with the thesis, Language, Identity and Culture, a study of language maintenance and shift among Amabhaca raised in Imzimkhulu, KwaZulu-Natal, supervised by Dr. E. Zungu. Mamuhato Makechani with the thesis, Exploring the link through which PGCE student-teachers topic-specific PCK is transferred in planning into enactment and into influencing learner outcomes. Supervised by Professor M. Mabunga. Nancy Mazuru with the thesis, Social Vulnerability During Disasters and its Impact on Community Development. The case of the 2014 Mukosi Dam floods in Masvingo, Zimbabwe, supervised by Professor M. Musemwa. Rehana Minti with the thesis, The Viability of Teaching and Learning Mathematics Using Information and Communication Technologies, ICTs, in Gauteng's paperless classrooms, supervised by Dr. I. Moll. Idelphonse Mkama with the thesis, an in-depth exploration of the first phase of inclusive deaf education in Tanzania, supervised by Professor C. Stopek. Meganathan Moodley with the thesis, Localizing an online computer software to include Setswana, an indigenous African language, for the South African teacher, supervised by Dr. R. Dlamini. Sipiwe Mudadigwa with the thesis, Exploring Ethical Leadership in Schools, Voices of Teachers from 4 Gauteng East District, supervised by Dr. S. Mtiane. Job Mwaura with the thesis, Digital Activism, a study of socio-political movements in Kenya, supervised by Associate Professor I. Dome. Cheryl Neal with the thesis, Understanding the Experience of Shame in Students Within a South African University Setting, a Mixed Method Psychosocial Approach, supervised by Associate Professor K. Bain. Vanessa Nicol with the thesis, Living in the Margins, Filling in the Gaps, the Making of the Colored Community of Durban, a Social and Political History, supervised by Professor M. Nifta Gordon. Nonhlanhla Ntuli with the thesis, An Investigation on How Multilingual Learners Process Questions During Evaluations, supervised by Dr. N. Kunene. Emmanuel Okom with the thesis, De la traduction à la méditation dans une classe de François langue étrangère en milieu plurilingue de Nigeria. From Translation to Meditation in a Foreign Language French Classroom in a Multilingual Nigeria, supervised by Dr. F. Horn. Ross Passmore with the thesis, Surrounding Pastness. Imagine questions from an expanded arts practice. Supervised by Professor R. Bester. Letitia Peterson, with the thesis Social Work in Healthcare, a Social Development Approach, supervised by Associate Professor E. Pretorius. Anthony Prangley, with the thesis Different Paths to the Same Place, Late Modern Narrative Identities in a South African Business School, supervised by Associate Professor R. Greenstein. Katiana Ramsey, with the thesis Understanding and Analyzing the Mediation Efforts of the SADC During Regional Crises, the Case of Madagascar, supervised by Professor G. Kadiakala. Sean Rogers, with the thesis The Relationship Between Multilingualism and Cognitive Functioning in South African Grade 3 Learners, supervised by Professor H. Jordan. Bernardus Simon, with the thesis Psychoanalytic Psychotherapist's Experience of Working with Psychotic Patients, supervised by Associate Professor C. Long. Cecilia Schulz, with the thesis The Governmentality of Sovereign Credit Ratings, Exploring the Political Economy of Creditworthiness in South Africa, supervised by Professor L. Hamilton. Megan Scott, with the thesis We Are Pretty Sure We Can Never Say Never, Exploring How Risk and Uncertainty Communication Impacts Care in Public Genetic Counseling Consultations in South Africa, supervised by Associate Professor J. Watermeyer and Dr. T. Vessels. Simpiwe Sesanti, with the thesis African Philosophy and the African Renaissance, A Quest for a True Humanity, supervised by Professor E. Etieibo. Zodwa Shongwe, with the thesis A Narrative Inquiry of the Journey and Educational Experiences of Deaf Learners and Their Teachers at a High School for the Deaf in Swaziland, supervised by Professor C. Storberg and Dr. D. McIlroy. John Simango, with the thesis Teachers' Pedagogical Approaches and Learners' Engagements with English Literacy Texts in Secondary Schools, Johannesburg West District, supervised by Dr. E. Porter and Dr. N. Gilaya. Beverly Slater, with the thesis Task Engagement and Flow in the Operational Safety of South African Civil Air Traffic Controllers, supervised by Professor A. Thatcher and Dr. D. Dystrom. Tulela Takane, with the thesis Exploring Mathematizing Processes of South African Grade 2 Learners for Solving Additive Relations Problems, supervised by Professor H. Vendarakrishan. Winani Tebele, with the thesis The Migrated Museum, Restitution or a Shared Heritage, supervised by Dr. H. White. Kutwakwashe Vanyoro, with the thesis This Place is a Bus Stop, The Temporalities of Immobile Zimbabwean Migrants at the Zimbabwe-South African Border, supervised by Professor L. Landau. Nonkanyiso Vogwana, with the thesis The Development of Topic-Specific Pedagogical Content Knowledge in Out-of-Field Natural Science Teachers in a Rural Context, supervised by Professor M. Rolnick and Mrs. M. Mabunga. Alexandra May Wheeler, with the thesis Post-Colonial Animals, an Exploration of Human-Animal Relationships in Literature, supervised by Associate Professor G. Gaylord.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, as Dean of the Faculty of Science, I have the honor to present candidates for degrees, diplomas, and certificates. We're graduating a total of 39 PhD students. In addition, we're graduating students for the Master of Science degree by dissertation, the Master of Science degree by coursework and research report, the Bachelor of Science Honours degree, and the Bachelor of Science degree. In addition, we are also awarding candidates the postgraduate diploma in scientific studies. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, to the graduates in the Faculty of Science for 2021, I want to say, congratulations and very well done. You have made it to the finish line under extraordinarily difficult circumstances brought about by the pandemic. And for that, you should be very proud. Each year, the highlight for our students, parents, guardians, and loved ones is the Wits graduation ceremony held in this great hall, with all of the color and grandeur that is a part of the fabric of this university and that has been experienced and enjoyed by previous generations for over the past almost 100 years. Alas, the current circumstances have made it impossible for us to meet face to face. I hope that it will not dampen your celebrations. You should feel a great sense of accomplishments in graduating today. This is also an important occasion for our academics and the university staff. This, after all, is one of only few occasions in the academic year when we pull on our full academic attire in all of its splendor. This gown reminds us about the commitment to the ideals of the university, to the principles and the values that we must continue to strive toward: integrity, academic freedom, academic excellence, respect, tolerance, and compassion are only some of the values that we hold dear and that form the foundations of this great university. Values that, I'm afraid, are fast becoming scarce in everyday society, no matter which direction you look. Our academics and administrators work tirelessly to ensure that our Wits degrees are valuable and meaningful, and that we produce graduates who are not only academically qualified, but who are also educated more broadly about this world in which we live, and about the challenges that we face as a human nation. As university graduates, we have enormous responsibilities to work toward making this a better world for all. I don't believe that our degrees are simply a means for us to enrich ourselves narrowly, but to give back to society selflessly. And I hope that you will keep this in mind as you enter the wide world beyond the confines of this university. And as you do, please stay connected with your alma mater. In years to come, you will realize that these were probably the best years of your life. Many of you would have established lifelong friendships and partnerships, even business partnerships, while being at Wits. And some of you even find your lifelong partners at Wits. Whatever it takes, I encourage you to stay in touch because it will be rewarding. Wits has produced over 180,000 alumni, many of whom have gone on to have successful careers and have made leading contributions to society and the world in which we live. You will now be joining this very special group of Wits graduates. Some of our alumni come back to Wits to share the successes with the newer generations of students, which is always very inspiring. Some come by to give an occasional seminar and so on. Some of our alumni host students as interns, or better still, employ them in businesses and organizations that they lead. I hope that you too will find ways in which you can ensure that Wits remains as a shining light on the Johannesburg skyline for many more decades, if not centuries to come. I would like to wish you all the very best in your lives ahead. There will be many challenges that you will encounter along the way. After climbing one hill, there will be more hills to climb. But of this I'm sure, your Wits education will be a lifelong experience that would have grounded you well to enable you to reach your goals and your dreams. Go well. Thank you.
Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the pleasure of presenting the students from the Faculty of Science for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. Richard Adam with the thesis Analysis of Public Policies and Programs to Water Security in Post-Apartheid South Africa, supervised by Professor D. Simatele. Uchechi Ahanonye with the thesis Teachers' Indigenous Knowledge and the Possibilities of Integrating It with the Life Sciences Teaching and Learning, supervised by Dr. F. Otulaja, Dr. I. Resenga, and Dr. S. Dukan. Mistura Ajani with the thesis Identification and Quantification of Environmental Radionuclides and the Use of Monte Carlo Codes for Gamma Ray Detector Optimization, supervised by Professor I. Usman and Dr. P. Malika. Ahmed Aya Mohammed Ali with the thesis Phenomenological Aspects of Axon-like Particles in Cosmology and Astrophysics, supervised by Dr. G. Berg. Armand Bahini with the thesis A Survey of Isoscalar Monopole Strength and its Fine Structure on Nuclei Across the Periodic Table, supervised by Professor I. Usman, Dr. R. Neveling, and Professor J. Carter. Amy Blur with the thesis The Complex Socio-Ecological System of the Low-Fat Marula Bioeconomic Catchment, supervised by Professor S. Grubb, Professor W. Twine, and Dr. D. Thompson. Ashley Blaine with the thesis The FOXP2-TBR1 interaction and its role in the regulation of DNA binding, supervised by Dr. S. Fanucci. Raymond Cousins with the thesis Spatial Modeling, Formation and Transformation of the Oldowan Lithic Artifact Assemblages from the Sterkfontein Caves, South Africa, supervised by Professor K. Coman and Professor D. Stratford. Hugo de Lemos with the thesis A Characterization of the Terrestrial Phenology of Bushbuck Ridge, South Africa, supervised by Professor M. Scholz and Professor M. Verstraete. Sylvia Del Santo with the thesis Study of Strangeness Production in PP Collisions at VS equals 5.02 TeV at the LHC and the upgrade of the Alice Moon trigger for high luminosity. Supervisors Professor Z. Vilagazi, Honorable Associate Professor Z. Buthelezi, and Professor E. Vesellini, Dr. L. Bianchi from the University of Turin. Olga Fayed with the thesis The Redox Regulation of CLCI1 and CLIC4 protein-protein interactions, supervised by Professor H.W. Durr. David Groenewald with the thesis A Litho and Biostratigraphic Analysis of the Lower Beaufort Group in the Distal Sector of the Main Karoo Basin, South Africa. Implications for the dispositional history of the distal 4 Deep to Blackbird Basin. Supervised by Professor B.S. Robich, Dr. M.O. Day, and Dr. C.R. Penn Clark. Pamela Harvey with the thesis Volcanic Forcing, Modeling Impacts on Southern Hemisphere Temperatures, supervised by Professor S. Greb. Tiffany Henshaw with the thesis Digging Through Betterment, an archaeological investigation into 19th and 20th century farming in rural southeastern South Africa, supervised by Professor M.H. Skuman and Professor M.D. Simatele. Celeste Johnson with the thesis A Biological Description of the Conformal Algebra at the Critical Point in 3 Dimensions, supervised by Professor J. Rodriguez. Christo Krill with the thesis The Min-Cut Graph, Intersection Graph, and Graph Operator, supervised by Professor E. Mpagobanda. Willem Kruger, with the thesis Massive Magnetite Layers of the Bushveld Complex, South Africa, Geology, Geochemistry and Genesis, supervised by Professor R. Latipov. Sibusiso Mabaso, with the thesis Solving some Diophantine equations involving Fibonacci numbers, Catalan numbers, Ramanujan functions, and factorials, supervised by Professor L. F. Luka. Takalani Makananisa, with the thesis Fell Fire Response Readiness of District Disaster Centers, a study of the Limpopo province, supervised by Professor D. Simatele. Tsitsi Maponga, with the thesis Mistletoes as Drivers of Plant Community Structure and Resource Heterogeneity in the Semi-Arid Savanna Ecosystems, Zimbabwe, supervised by Professor E.T.F. Witowski and Professor H.J.T. Ndagurwa. Ofi Marom, with the thesis Leveraging Prior Knowledge for Sample-Efficient Reinforcement Learning, supervised by Professor B. Rossman. Victor Mashindi, with the thesis Hollow and Hemispherical Bowl-like Hollow Carbon Spheres and their doped counterparts as opposed for platinum for use in fuel cell oxygen reduction reactions, supervised by Professor N. Colville, Professor K.I. Uzumena, and Professor P. Leverg. Khuliso Masindi, with the thesis Water Resources Modeling in the Vaal River Basin, an integrated approach, supervised by Professor G. Drennan. Kosingiphile Mnguni, with the thesis Symmetry and Conversation Laws of Recurrence Equations and Classes of Time Fractional Equations, supervised by Dr. M. Folibetula and Professor S. Jamal. Alseno Muzai, with the thesis Development of Functionalized Zeolite and Bentonite for the Recovery of Platinum Group Elements, PGEs, and Rare Earth Elements, REEs, from aqueous systems impacted by mining activities, supervised by Professor H. Tutu. Otmane Moane, with the thesis Physical Properties of Pulse Laser and CVD Synthesized Carbon Nanospheres, supervised by Professor E. Sideras Haddad, Professor D. Wamwangi, and Professor A. Forbes. Denny Mukonda, with the thesis Phonological Aspects of Asymmetric Structures, supervised by Professor O. O. Otafudu and Dr. W. Tuku. Gideon Mutanda, with the thesis From Livelihoods to Citizenship, the Redistributive Land Reform in Zimbabwe, supervised by Dr. A. Wafer. Matibele Chabeling, with the thesis Pre-Existing Fluid-Driven Fracture, Mathematical Models and Solution, supervised by Dr. A. G. Ferreiro. Candice Neves, with the thesis Geographic Variation in Brain Morphology and Cognition in the genus Rhabdomys, supervised by Professor N. Pillay. Sonwabile Ngcezu, with the thesis An Investigation of Nano-Disymmetric Parameters for Realistic Geometries and a Novel Study of the Track Structure, Penumbra Region, supervised by Professor D. van der Merwe, Dr. H. Rabus, and Professor J. Larkin. Thabo Pheme, with the thesis Design and Synthesis of Aldol Addition Catalyst Peptides, supervised by Professor M. Makatini and Professor D. Brady. Granny Ramullo, with the thesis Late Transition Metal Fischer Carbene Complexes of Group 9 and 11, Synthesis and Application, supervised by Professor D. I. Bezuidenhout, Dr. J. L. van Wyk, and Dr. I. Kutsia. Memory Read, with the thesis The Climate Change Water Energy Nexus and its Impact on Urban Livelihoods, supervised by Professor M. D. Simatele. Larissa Snow, with the thesis Poisoned potent patent, arose as an index of SAN personhood, supervised by Professor D.G. Pierce. Charles Takalana, with a thesis in analysis of differential observations of the cosmological radio background, studying the SZE-21CM, supervised by Dr. P. Machegiani and Professor N. Comyn. Adriaan van der Walt, with a thesis in analysis of extreme temperature events in South Africa, 1960 to 2015, supervised by Professor J. Fitchett and Professor C. Curtis. Danielle van der Westhuizen, with a thesis, the synthesis and evaluation of bis-1,2,3 triazoledine carbazolide gold complexes as anti-cancer agents, supervised by Professor D.I. Bezedenot, Professor O. Munro, and Dr. A. Stander. Mark Wright, with the thesis, Wind Speed Climatology in the Northern, Western, and Eastern Capes of South Africa, Implication for Wind Power, supervised by Professor S. Greb. Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to present the following graduation awards for the Faculty of Science. The Isaac Greenberg Award, which is an award that is made annually to a graduate in botany for the purpose of carrying out the research in some aspects of plant ecology. It is awarded to Tsitsi Sithandiwe Mabonga. The PhD Thesis in Computational and Applied Mathematics Award. This prize is awarded to the best computational and applied mathematics Doctor of Philosophy thesis. It is awarded to Matibele Willie Nchabeleng.
Good day, Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, members of our esteemed senior executive team and academic staff, and a special greeting to our graduates and viewers joining us remotely for today's graduation ceremony. In no version of our world ever did I expect to be participating in a graduation ceremony in which our renowned Great Hall was not packed to the brim with graduates and their loved ones. Graduation is the culmination of your academic journey and a time to recognize and celebrate the enormous amount of hard work and dedication that you have invested into your education. It is exceptionally unfortunate that I cannot address you in person. With that being said, please feel free to leverage the power of technology and social media and post some pictures and videos of how you're celebrating your graduation with all COVID protocols in place. Do not forget to use the hashtag #WitsieForLife. My name is Stacey Lee Bolon, and I'm the president of the Wits Convocation Executive. Convocation is a body established officially under the university statutes to represent graduates of the university, as well as the registrar, full-time permanent members of the academic staff, professors emeriti, and retired staff. I would therefore like to take this opportunity to welcome you, Wits graduates, as the newest members of our convocation. You have now officially joined the ranks of some 200,000 members of Wits Convocation. Membership of Convocation is free and gives its members unique privileges, which includes, for example, nominating the Chancellor of the University. Our Convocation Executive mandates that the Convocation Exco discusses and states its opinion upon any matters relating to the University, including matters referred to it by Council, allowing for the views of this body to be represented at the highest levels of governance of the University. Convocation acts as an official channel, allowing members to convey to the University management their views about the University, and thus forms a vital link between the University and the global community in which it operates. This is, of course, of vital importance as the long-term reputation of our university impacts the value of the Wits degree in the market. Graduates, in your hand you hold the great gift of education. May I implore you to use your knowledge, your degree, to the best of your ability in pursuit of fulfilling your life's ambition. Today you enter the world as a graduate from one of the greatest universities on the African continent. You enter into a world filled with many challenges, but a world that is also filled with limitless possibilities. May you meet all the challenges and opportunities that await you with pride, drive, passion, innovation, social conscience, and positive purpose. Now that you are a Wits grad, please remain responsible. Whilst we certainly focus today's attention on our newest grads, it is also fitting to recognize those that have helped our grads through their academic career. Many of you have been supported financially, and it is likely that all of you have been supported with a great deal of encouragement. I would like to extend recognition to your loved ones, mums, dads, gogos, umkulus, and everyone else that has supported you through your academic journey. Please take the time to include and celebrate your achievement with those that have supported you. I would also like to spend a moment and extend thanks to the Wits academic team who have dedicated their time to teaching our future leaders. Thank you. Last night, you would have received an email to your student email address. Please ensure that you check this email and complete our graduate exit survey and provide us with your updated email details. This survey will take you about 5 minutes to complete and will assist in informing university policies and plans. I look forward to checking out social media to see how you're celebrating your graduation. #Witsy4Life. Please remain in contact with us, follow us on social media platforms, and join us for discussions, debates, and updates on LinkedIn. Wishing you the very best of luck in your future pursuits. We hope that you make us proud. And whatever you do, just remember, you got your edge at Wits.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the proceedings for today. And now, by virtue of the powers vested in me as Vice-Chancellor and Principal, I hereby dissolve this congregation of the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg.